You had the audacity to cheat on me. Go and don't ever come back again.
My husband, please, it was a mistake. Forgive me.
Wow.
There is a silence that hurts more than crying. Not the silence of an empty room, not the silence of a sleeping house, but the silence of a woman sitting alone in her yard, very early in the morning, looking at a door she can no longer open because the man behind it has already decided to leave. That is where we find Chioma. Not at the beginning, when things were still good, not when there was still time to fix things. We find her at the end, when every choice she made has caught up with her and there is nothing she can do anymore. But to understand how she got there, we have to go back to the village of Umunze, a quiet and proud Igbo community, where the red soil is full of memory, where every path through the bush leads to someone's story, and where the elders say the ancestors never truly leave. In Umunze, there was a farmer named Emeka. He was not a rich man, but he worked hard. His hands had turned poor soil into something that could feed a family. His home was clean. His child ate well. He carried himself with quiet dignity. And for a while, he had Chioma. People who knew them in the early years still talked about how she used to walk to his farm in the afternoon heat, carrying food for him.
My husband, I see you've worked so hard today. Please come and eat.
Wow, thank you so much, my wife. Drop it, let's eat together.
They remembered her laugh loud and free and unashamed. They remembered how she would call his name from across the yard and he would stop everything just to answer her. That was Chioma then. But people change. It does not happen all at once. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to stop loving someone. It happens slowly, the way the dry season creeps in, little by little. Until one day you look around and everything is dry and cracked, and you cannot even remember when the rain stopped. After their daughter was born, Chioma changed. Nobody could explain it. Not even Chioma herself. Maybe she was tired. Maybe the love had simply run out. Maybe there was something restless inside her that she had never given a name to. Sometimes, she would sit in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed, staring at the wall, feeling a heaviness she could not explain to anyone, not even to herself. Whatever it was, she pulled away from Emeka. She stopped sitting close to him in the evenings. She stopped asking about the farm. She cooked his food and put it down, but her heart was no longer in it. She was there in body, but her mind was somewhere else. Emeka felt it. He tried the way a quiet man tries, without many words. He would stay close to her in the kitchen. He would sit at the table longer than needed. He would wait for her to come back to him. One evening, he asked her directly, quietly, without anger.
Chioma, I've noticed you've been distant from me lately and quiet. What's happening with us?
Nothing. I'm just tired.
But the way she said it, flat and empty, like a door closing, told him that nothing was exactly what was left between them. She did not come back. And so, after months of waiting and saying nothing, Emeka did what many men do when they do not know how to handle pain. He buried himself in work. He left for the farm earlier than before. He came home later than before. He filled the silence between them with tiredness and labor. But it was what happened that night that first planted doubt deep in Chioma's heart. It started small. So small, she almost ignored it the first time. She would wake up in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock, sometimes 3, and reach across the bed to find it empty beside her, cold, as if he had been gone for a while already. She would lie there and listen to the yard. She would hear the quiet sounds of someone moving, the soft creak of the back door, the sound of water running briefly, footsteps crossing the yard in the dark, and then the gate. The slow, careful sound of the gate being opened, just wide enough for one person to pass through. and then nothing. Just the night, and the insects, and the empty bed beside her. Sometimes, she would get up and stand at the window and look out into the darkness, but there was nothing to see, just the empty yard. Just the gates, left slightly open. Just the night air. She told herself it was the farm. That was what Emeka always said, the few times she asked. I have work to do. The early morning is the best time. The ground is cool. I can get more done before the sun gets too high. It sounded reasonable. It was exactly the kind of thing a farmer would say. She told herself this for weeks. But there is a difference between a man who wakes up early for his farm and a man who moves through his own yard like someone trying not to be heard. A farmer getting ready for a day's work does not tiptoe. A farmer heading to his fields does not ease the gates open, inch by inch in complete darkness. Something about it never felt right in her chest. The first week, she said nothing and watched. The second week, she watched more carefully and said even less. By the third week, she was barely sleeping at all, lying stiff in the darkness, following his every movement by sound, her mind turning each small thing over and over until it became something else entirely. Some nights, he did not get up at all, and she still slept badly because by now her mind had built a story, and the story would not leave her alone, no matter what Emeka did or did not do. Some nights, he rose at 2 and was gone for hours. Those nights, she lay staring at the ceiling with her jaw tight and her hands cold, her thoughts going around the same question: where is he going? What kind of farming happens at 2 in the morning, in complete darkness, in silence? She began to notice other things, 2 small things she might have ignored before, but could no longer ignore now that her eyes had been sharpened by suspicion. The way Ima, the housemaid, sometimes avoided looking directly at Emeka when he was in the yard, a careful, quiet avoidance that could mean nothing or could mean everything. The way Femi, the gateman, seemed to move around the yard with a particular awareness of Emeka's schedule, knowing things, anticipating things, the way people do when they are close to a secret. And one evening, just once, just briefly, she saw it. Emeka crossing the yard, Emma stepping out of the kitchen doorway at the same moment. And in the single second before Emma looked away, something passed between them. A look, small enough that a person not watching carefully would have missed it completely. Chioma saw it. She said nothing, but she stored it away in the place where she had been keeping everything else every midnight. Absence, every careful footstep, every creak of the gate and the picture they formed together became one she could no longer talk herself out of. Once the thought fully took hold, it did not leave. She watched how Emeka came home some evenings, quiet, distracted, his eyes somewhere far away. She watched, and she began to wonder, and the wondering turned into a story. And the story, after enough time and enough sleepless nights, began to feel like fact. He is not going to the farm. He is going to Ima. There was no proof she could hold in her hands and show anyone. No message, no confession, nothing solid. But in her mind, all the pieces had arranged themselves with a terrible neatness that felt more convincing than proof. Jealousy, when you feed it long enough, stops feeling like jealousy. It starts to feel like truth. Some nights, she lay awake going over the story again and again, feeling her chest tighten until she thought she would have to get up and leave the room just to breathe. She wanted to confront him. She wanted to throw the question at him across the bed like something sharp. But she had no proof. And without proof, she would only look like the difficult, suspicious wife she feared he already thought she was. So she waited and she watched. And the anger inside her hardened slowly into something cold and decided. Then one night, the night she had been waiting for, she felt him stare beside her. It was a little past midnight. The yard was completely quiet. She lay perfectly still, her eyes closed, her breathing slow, and even the practiced stillness of a woman who had been preparing for exactly this moment. She heard him sit up. She heard the quiet sounds of him reaching for his clothes in the dark, the careful, deliberate movements of a man trying not to wake anyone. She kept her breathing steady. She did not move so much as a finger. She heard him stand. She heard his footsteps cross the room slow, toe to heel in the dark, each step placed carefully, like someone who has done this many times and knows exactly which boards to avoid. She tracked him by sound. She heard the door ease open, not thrown wide, just enough, and then his footsteps crossing the yard outside. She waited, she counted, and then she heard him stop. Not at the gate, not heading toward the road that led to the farm. He stopped somewhere much closer, somewhere in the middle of the yard, near the maid's room. Her eyes opened in the dark. She lay there for a long moment, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her ears, telling herself she was wrong, telling herself she had misheard, telling herself there was another explanation, there was always another explanation, but she had told herself that too many times already. She got up quietly. She wrapped something around her shoulders. She crossed the yard in the dark, her feet careful and silent on the cool ground. She stood outside Ima's door and she listened. She heard enough. She did not open the door that night. She turned around and walked back to the bedroom, back to the bed that still held the warm shape of where he had been lying, and she sat on the edge of it in the darkness, shaking. She sat there until she heard his footsteps return, until she heard him cross the yard again, quiet and unhurried, until she heard him ease back into the room and settle into the bed as if nothing had happened. She lay down beside him. She stared at the ceiling. She said nothing. But in her mind, the plan was already forming clear and cold and completely decided. The next evening, she called Ima. The girl came and stood in the doorway, her eyes cast slightly down, her hands folded in front of her, the posture of someone who has learned that being obedient is the safest way to live in someone else's house. "You will sleep in the guest room tonight," Chioma said. Her voice was completely calm. The calmness of a woman who has already crossed the line inside herself and is simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Something moved behind Ima's eyes. Surprise. Or something closer to fear. "Yes, ma," she said quietly. "I will sleep in your room tonight," Chioma said. "I want to see something." Ima said nothing more. She nodded and went to gather her things. And so that night, Chioma lay in the small bed in the maid's room in complete darkness, waiting. She had spent the evening watching Emeka move around the yard. With that particular quiet energy, she had learned to recognize the restlessness of a man waiting for the house to go to sleep. She had watched him glance once, briefly, in the direction of the maid's room. She had watched and said nothing and smiled when he looked her way. She had waited for the yard to go dark and quiet. And then she had gone to Ima's room, laying down in the small bed, pulled the cover up, and closed her eyes. She knew he would come. The yard was completely still. The only sound was crickets. A dog shifted somewhere near the fence and went quiet again. Chioma lay with her eyes open, staring at nothing. She told herself she was ready, that whatever she found, she could face it. That knowing, even the worst kind of knowing, was better than the slow poison of not knowing. But in the silence, doubt crept in. What if she had read everything wrong? What if the footsteps had stopped somewhere else and her tired, suspicious mind had filled in the rest? What if she turned on the lamp and found a stranger, or worse, found nobody, and had to spend the rest of her life knowing what she had been willing to do, based on nothing but a feeling? She pushed the thoughts down. She had seen what she had seen. She had heard what she had heard. She was here now. Then footsteps. Her entire body went still. Every nerve sharpened at once. The footsteps were slow and confident. The footsteps of someone moving through darkness. They knew completely, not feeling their way, not hesitating. Walking a path their body had memorized. The door opened. No knock, no words, no light. The figure moved into the room with a quiet, practiced ease that turned her stomach the ease of someone who had done this many times before. In this room, on this same path, from the door to the bed, she heard the sound of clothing being removed. Then, the weight of a man settling into the bed beside her. She lay perfectly still. It is Emeka, she told herself. He has come here thinking Ima is in this bed. This is everything I suspected. This is the proof. She told herself this once. She told herself this twice. But by the third time, her body was already sending her messages. Her mind did not want to receive. The weight was wrong. The warmth was wrong. The way he breathed was wrong. Every small familiar thing that a wife absorbs without thinking over years of sleeping beside the same man, none of it matched. It was the way you would know, in the dark, if someone had replaced a familiar object with a copy. Something in your hands would know before your eyes did. Her hands went cold. The air in the room seemed to change. She reached out for the lamp. The light came on. She did not scream right away. There were a few terrible, suspended seconds. Just two people staring at each other, while the full weight of what had just happened settled over both of them at once. Like a roof, slowly coming down.
Oh, my ancestors. Femi, it's you! Come on, get out of this room!
I am very sorry, ma. I didn't know it was you.
The man in the bed was not Emeka. It was Femi, the gate man. A young man who had come in the darkness, thinking he would find the maid, because it was now horrifyingly, undeniably clear that it was not Emeka who had been visiting this room in the night hours. It had been Femi, moving through the yard in the dark with that familiar confidence, opening the gate at midnight, not to leave, but simply as part of his routine of coming and going. Visiting Ima in the hours when the yard was asleep. A foolish and reckless secret that had just walked itself straight into disaster. The look Chioma had seen pass between them in the yard that evening. The footsteps she had tracked in the dark. The sounds she had heard outside Ima's door. It had not been Emeka. It had never been Emeka. The realization did not come gently. It came all at once, like a floor disappearing. Her husband had been going to his farm in those night hours, just as he had always said. He had been carrying the pain of their broken marriage in the only way he knew how, in silence, in hard work, in distance. While she lay awake in their bed, building a case against him, he had been alone in a field somewhere in the dark, working. And she had taken all of that, every absence, every silence, every averted glance, and woven it into a story. And the story had brought her here. Femi's face crumbled. He did not try to compose himself. There was nothing in his expression except the raw, total fear of a young man who understood completely what had happened and knew there was nothing in the world that could undo it. He fell to the floor, his knees hitting the ground hard, his voice breaking completely as he pressed his hands together. Ma, forgive me. Ma, I swear I did not know. Ma, please, I thought I did not know it was you. God is my witness. I did not know. Chioma sat upright. She looked at him, at his shaking hands, at his forehead pressed toward the floor. She felt nothing she had expected to feel. Not the satisfaction of being right because she had not been right. Not the relief of finally knowing because what she now knew was worse than anything she had imagined. Not anger, not grief. Just a vast, terrible emptiness, the feeling of standing in a place where everything familiar has been swept away, and you are the one who swept it. She said nothing. She pointed at the door. He left, and she sat alone in that room, in the lamplight, while the crickets continued outside as if nothing had happened, as if the world had not just completely rearranged itself around her. There are secrets you carry in your heart. And then there are secrets that begin to carry you. Chioma told no one. The next morning, she sent Femi away without a single word of explanation. He looked at her once, just once, with a face full of shame and a sorrow that had no words. Then he turned and walked away down the road and did not look back. She returned to her daily life. She cooked. She swept. She greeted the neighbors who called from the fence. She washed Emeka's clothes and hung them on the line the way she always had. But inside, she was completely broken. Every ordinary thing felt like acting. Every time Emeka sat across from her at the table, honest, unsuspecting, carrying his own quiet pain, she felt the secret rise in her throat and had to push it back down. She would look at his hands and think about the farm and the dark mornings and the long hours he had spent working while she lay in their bed, turning his absence into evidence against him. The shame did not come all at once. It came in layers. First the shock, then the disbelief, then, slowly, the full understanding of what she had done and what she had set in motion. She started avoiding the mirror. She stopped sitting with the neighbors. She moved through the yard like a woman, trying to take up as little space as possible. She told herself it was an accident, that she had not known, that it was not her fault, not entirely, that any woman in her position might have done the same. But the truth does not bargain. It does not care about your reasons. It simply sits and waits for you to stop running from it. Weeks passed. The walls of the yard felt closer every day. And then, her body told her something she was not ready to hear. She sat alone in the bathroom one morning, hands flat on her stomach, staring at the floor between her feet.
Oh, my ancestors, what have I done? How can I tell Emeka that this child isn't his?
The yard was full of ordinary sound. Children passing the gate, the smell of firewood from somewhere close. None of it reached her. She was somewhere very far away, alone with a truth that had no good ending in any direction she looked. Chioma carried the pregnancy in silence. She managed it with the grinding, exhausting discipline of a woman whose survival now depended entirely on pretending. Every morning she got up and became the version of herself that other people expected to see. She smiled when it was required. She answered questions without giving anything away. She kept her eyes clear and her voice steady. She said nothing to Emeka. She said nothing to her mother, who came to visit one afternoon and stood in the kitchen doorway and watched her daughter move around the room, watched the way she moved, too carefully, too controlled, like a person carrying something fragile inside. Chioma, are you okay? Chioma kept her back to her, kept stirring the pot. I am fine, Mama. Just tired. Her mother did not leave immediately. She stood there longer than necessary, the way a woman stands when she knows a door is closed to her, but cannot bring herself to walk away from it. Then she sighed softly. Then she nodded. Then she left. And Chioma stood over the pot in the empty kitchen, and the steam rose around her face, and she said nothing to no one. As the months passed, The pregnancy became harder to hide and harder to carry in every sense. The weight of the secret had become physical, pressing on her chest even when she lay down, following her into sleep, meeting her every morning before she was fully awake. There were moments she came very close to telling Emeka. Moments she would open her mouth and feel the words right there, ready, and then close it again. Because once it was said, there was no taking it back. And she was not ready for what came after. So, she carried it alone, until the body decided it had carried it long enough. When the time came for the baby to be born, the midwife Ngozi was called a woman who had brought more lives into Umunze than anyone could count. The old women said her hands could feel the difference between a body that was struggling and a body being held back by something invisible. The labor started. Hours passed. The room grew heavy, not only with heat or with waiting, but with something older and quieter. Something that pressed against the walls of the room, like a presence that had been patient for a very long time and had finally decided its moment had arrived. Ngozi worked quietly and without stopping, and then she stopped. She sat back and looked at Chioma, not as a midwife looks at a patient, but the way an elder looks at someone standing at the very edge of the thing they have been running from. Chioma, she said. Her voice was low. The room was completely still.
Chioma, you're carrying something heavier than this baby.
Ngozi did not shout. She did not accuse. She said what she knew the way the Igbo say hard things plainly, without decoration, without making a show of someone else's pain. She spoke of something the people of Umunze had understood for generations. They called it the way of the land, the deep old knowing that the earth does not forget what people try to bury. That when a woman carries a secret of this kind, born in confusion, kept in silence, grown heavy over months, the land holds it alongside her. And sometimes, that shared secret becomes a wall that new life cannot pass through. The baby cannot come, Ngozi said quietly, until the truth comes first. Chioma closed her eyes. She was tired, in a way the labor alone could not explain. She had been carrying this moment inside her for months, going around it every day, sleeping with it, waking to it, learning to move through ordinary life as if it were not always right there beside her. She was tired of going around it. She was tired of all of it. The tears came not the loud, breaking tears of a woman falling apart, but the quiet, slow tears of someone who has been holding a weight far too heavy for far too long and has finally, in complete exhaustion, decided to put it down. "Call my husband," she whispered. One of the women went out. Emeka came into the room slowly. He read the faces around him the way a man reads the weather, sensing trouble before he fully understood it. He stepped inside. He looked at his wife. He waited. Chioma told him everything. It did not come easily. It came the way deeply buried things come slowly, in pieces, each word costing her something she would not get back. She told him about the nights she had lain awake, listening to him rise and leave, about tracking his footsteps through the yard in the dark, night after night, building a case out of absences, about the look she had seen or thought she had seen pass between him and Ima, about the nights she had stood outside Ima's door and listened, and drawn the worst possible conclusion from what she heard, about the plan, how certain she had felt, how decided, about lying in the small bed in the dark, about the footsteps, about the terrible familiar ease with which the figure had moved in, about reaching for the lamp, about Femi's face in the light, about understanding, in that single instant, that it had never been Emeka, that her husband had been going to his farm, just as he had always said, that she had taken his silence and his pain and his absence and made them into something they were never meant to be. She told him about the months of silence that followed, about her mother in the kitchen doorway, about the bathroom floor, about the child. Emeka stood through all of it without moving. He did not shout. He did not break anything. He did not ask her to stop or to hurry or to explain herself further. He simply stood there and listened the way a man listens when the ground beneath everything he knew has shifted and there is nothing steady left to hold on to. When she finished, the room was silent. He looked at her for a long time, not with hatred, not even with the hot anger she might have expected and perhaps deserved, with something quieter, something that was in many ways harder to survive than anger, a deep, lasting sadness. The look of a man who is understanding all at once. How two people can share a bed and a life and a child and still be so completely alone inside it that one of them builds an entire false world and lives in it for months without the other ever knowing. Then he turned around and he walked out. The baby was born still. The women handled everything with the quiet, careful grace of a community that has learned across many generations how to hold grief without demanding that it makes sense. They said the old words. They did what needed to be done. They did not ask Chioma to be composed. She lay back on the mat when it was over, empty in every direction. Outside, the morning had come without asking her permission. That thin, pale light before the sun decides to arrive. Emeka did not come back that morning. He did not come back the next day either. When Chioma was strong enough to leave the bed, her parents came. They had heard the way parents hear things, through the particular network of worry and half-spoken words that connects a family across distance. Her mother came first, then her father, then an uncle who said little but whose presence meant that this was now a family matter. They sat with her in the yard and they listened, and when she had told them what she could bear to tell them, her father sat up straight in his chair and said, "What Igbo fathers say when a daughter's home has broken and they believe it can still be repaired, we will go and see your husband." They went to Emeka's family house. Her mother, her father, her uncle, and Chioma herself, moving slowly, still weak from everything her body had been through. They went with kola nuts and with prepared words. They went the way families go when they are hoping that what has broken can still be mended, that a man's heart can still be reached if the right people come with the right words. They arrived at the compound. Emeka was not at the gate, but Chioma's belongings were, not thrown carelessly, not scattered in anger, but placed arranged, even in a neat pile, just outside the compound entrance. Her wrapper, her pots, her clothing, folded. Her daughter's small things bundled carefully beside them. Everything that was hers, gathered and set outside the gate with a terrible, quiet care that was somehow worse than if he had thrown them in fury. Chioma's mother made a sound, a low, sharp sound, and pressed her hand to her mouth. Her father stood very still, looking at the pile of things, and something passed across his face that Chioma had never seen there before. They knocked. Emeka came to the gate. He looked at all of them, the father, the mother, the uncle, Chioma standing behind them, still pale and thin from everything her body had been through. He looked at them the way a man looks when he has already made peace with a decision and is not prepared to change it. Chioma's father spoke first. He spoke carefully, with respect, with the measured words of a man who understood that what he was asking required humility. He acknowledged the wrong that had been done. He did not minimize it. He asked for mercy. He spoke of the children, of the years, of the life that still remained to be built. Emeka listened. He did not interrupt. When the father finished, Emeka was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Everything that belongs to her is outside." That was all. Chioma's mother stepped forward. Then her voice was different from her father's. Lower, closer to breaking. She spoke as a mother speaks when she is pleading for her child, not with the formal language of negotiation, but with something rawer, something that had no strategy in it, only pain. "Emeka, please, she is the mother of your child. Whatever has happened, she is still the mother of your child." Emeka looked at Chioma's mother for a long moment. Then he looked at Chioma, and in that look was everything, the whole weight of the marriage, the silence, the distance, the broken trust, the months she had lain beside him, building a story about him, while he went to his farm, alone, in the dark. All of it in one look. Then he stepped back, and he closed the gate. The uncle knocked again, louder. No answer. The father called his name, once, twice. The yard was silent. They stood at the gates for a long time, the four of them, with Chioma's belongings piled on the ground beside them, and the morning sun climbing higher, and the road behind them beginning to fill with people going about their day. Eventually, Chioma's father bent and picked up one end of her things. Her uncle picked up the other. Her mother took Chioma by the hand gently, the way you take the hand of someone who needs help walking, even when no one can see the wound, and they turned and walked back down the road. Chioma did not look back at the gate, but she felt it behind her the whole way home. The closed gate, the silent yard, the neat pile of everything she had been reduced to, standing on the wrong side of the entrance to her own married life. She moved back into her parents' house. She was not loud about her grief. She did not wail in the yard or refuse to eat or give the village extra things to talk about. She simply returned smaller than when she had left, quieter, moving through the rooms of her childhood home like someone who is not entirely sure they still belong anywhere. The village found out the way villages always find out, not through any single announcement, through the gradual, unmistakable shift in how people look at you when you pass. The greetings that became shorter, the conversations that stopped a moment too soon. Chioma lived it quietly. She did not defend herself. She did not explain. She simply carried what she had to carry the way women in Umunze have always carried the heaviest things, in silence and in motion, and one day at a time. In Umunze, when the older women sit together in the evenings and the talk turns to Chioma, they do not speak of her with hatred. They speak of her the way the Igbos speak of hard lessons with sadness and the particular understanding of people who know that none of us are as far from her choices as we would like to believe. The way you speak of someone who reached into fire not from stupidity, but from a deep, very human need to know. They say, jealousy showed her the door, and she walked through it in the dark. They say, she went looking for proof of one thing and found something she was never prepared for. They say, the land does not punish those who fall. It waits for those who refuse to speak the truth. And sometimes, when a young wife in Umunze begins to feel that cold, familiar feeling, the suspicion creeping in, the silence between her and her husband growing wider, the distance becoming something she has started filling with stories. One of the older women will quietly come and sit beside her. She will not say much at first. Just sit. The way people sit with each other in Umunze when words have not yet found their shape. And then, softly, after a while, she will say, talk to him, before the silence becomes something you cannot take back. The young woman will nod. And somewhere, In the long memory of the village, Chioma nods too. This has been a story from Africa Talesphere, where every story carries a lesson, and every lesson belongs to all of us. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, the truth, however painful, is always lighter than the secret.